In the wake of California's lawsuit against the Trump administration over its federalization of National Guard troops, what are the arguments for and against, and where's it likely to go from here? As the protests spread and the implications of this case do too, we're joined by panelists Mike Leon, NTD News contributor and the host of the Can We Please Talk podcast, and Gerard Filitti, senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. Gerard, Mike, good to have you both with us. Gerard, let's start with examining California's lawsuit. The California National Guard were unilaterally federalized. California is arguing that this deployment violates the 10th Amendment, which protects state sovereignty, and that the governor's consent is needed for such an action. How do you think this will be weighed in the courts?
Well, I think first we need to see what the Trump administration files today at noon in response to this motion by the governor for an injunction. I think that will lay out the administration's arguments much more clearly. Ultimately, the president does have authority under federal law, under Title X, to federalize the National Guard and use them in certain circumstances. The argument here is that one of those circumstances applies. We have yet to see which particular section he is relying on for this authority. Governor Newsom, on the other hand, is saying that the president needs state consent. That is an argument, that is something that is provided for under Article 10, under Title 10, that there are conditions under which a state should be consenting to the use of National Guard troops. However, the issue ultimately here comes down to what these troops are being used for. If they're being used to prevent violence against law enforcement activities, but not engage in law enforcement activities, then the Trump administration has a strong argument that this is something that Title 10 allows the president to do.
All right. And Mike, while Trump has not yet invoked the Insurrection Act, the law does give him broad authority to decide whether it's necessary. If he does indeed decide to invoke this act, how could such a move perhaps sway public opinion on these protests?
Yeah, the way you landed the plane on the question, Steph, is the $64,000 question, right? Because the Insurrection Act wasn't even invoked on January 6th back in 2021 when we saw what happened with respect to government property and people losing their lives and police officers attacked. So it would be a little hypocritical. Steph, for the audience out there, I want to give a couple of numbers here, and maybe Gerard could kind of piggyback on the legal argument that maybe California will make. 50 arrests, 6 police officers attacked, aggravated assault charges for a few folks out there protesting. What protest am I speaking about? I'm speaking about the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl parade that just happened a few months ago in Philadelphia. And that's to a police department that has over 5,500 troops, right, at their deployment, and they're ready. And no National Guard was summoned for that. And we saw acts of violence, as I just mentioned there, people charged in the streets. Now, again, these protests, a bigger county. Los Angeles County has over 8,800 police officers. I just heard Jim O'Donnell speak earlier yesterday in conjunction with the mayor, where he was asked about the potential provocation of more National Guard troops being deployed, potentially more Marines, now 4,700 potentially at his disposal. Did that escalate things? And he couldn't give a straight answer with respect to all of this. But one of the things that he did emphasize is that our police officers are trained to handle this. And I just mentioned the sheer numbers and volumes of Los Angeles. This is not a small city. This is not a rural town. This is a very big city that can handle this type of protest. Now, again, could they do it better with respect to having federalized troops at the president's discretion? Yes, of course. But the chain of command in all of this has always worked, from left to right, which is local law enforcement. Hey, we need help. State, we're at our limit. We need federalized National Guard to be deployed. It's only happened maybe 2 other times in our nation's history with respect to civil rights movement. So, again, how we will look at this politically, it depends on where you fall. If there's an R or a D next to your name, because some people will say this is a provocation tactic. LA has this kind of under control already. We've seen already them put the curfew into place. Other people will argue, like Pam Bondi was in the recent hit before I came on the segment, she was saying, we're watching this on TV and it's unfolding, and we needed to step in and do something before this got out of control like it did back in 2020 during the George Floyd protests. So it all depends on what side of the argument you land on with this, Steph.
And thanks for that, Mike. So, Gerard, I do want to hear your response in terms of the political elements here, but also in terms of the legal elements of this Insurrection Act. California, in this particular suit, is saying that this act should be used for military deployment, but it's also saying that the circumstances in the Los Angeles protests and riots do not qualify for such for invoking that act. Do you believe, under the circumstances, and also what is required under this act to invoke it?
Well, first, going back to something Leon said, it's very telling. There's a difference between a one-off, a riot or an incident or clashes with police over a Super Bowl win or a sports win, which has a finite end, and something that is a ongoing federal law enforcement operation to crack down on violations of immigration law. The problem in California is that this is not a one-off. It's not one incident in response to one arrest. This is a series of ongoing arrests that the federal government wants to make, which is generating outrage in the California community, but more than outrage, it's leading to violence. We do see people engaging with police officers. We now know that the FBI put on its top 10 list someone who was throwing rocks at the police vehicles, like federal police vehicles. The issue from Donald Trump's perspective is that these individuals are not immediately being arrested. You're watching videos of people dancing on burning cars, and you don't see law enforcement moving in to arrest them. That's what strengthens his argument that local and state law enforcement is not able to keep up with what's going on and why the National Guard is needed. Now, for the Insurrection Act, there would, of course, be a valid reason to invoke that if there is an insurrection, if there is a rebellion against the government that is not being able to be put down or restrained by state agencies. However, he doesn't need to invoke the Insurrection Act so long as the National Guard is limited to protecting law enforcement, not actually engaging in arrests. Now, if he wants to send the National Guard into buildings to arrest people, then he does need to invoke the Insurrection Act, and I think that will open a host of problems for him politically.
Now, Mike, I want to look at the FBI saying that it's investigating possible links between these riots and protests and external funding. If links are discovered, how might that impact the conversation around these protests?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll impact it tremendously, obviously, because if there is, influence into these protesters and these agitators, Gavin Newsom has already mentioned, you have a right to peacefully protest, but if you're out there committing acts of violence, like Gerard said, and throwing bricks and stuff like that at police officers, you will be dealt with. So if there is something that's uncovered from the FBI's perspective with agitation and if somebody paying for these agitators and the escalation of it, I hope they're prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But just real quick, going back to what Gerard said, and I agree with what you're saying, Gerard, about the sports point, and there's a finite end. But my point is that everyone knows there's an overwhelming of the system when a team wins a Super Bowl. And then there's a parade that's planned maybe a day or two afterwards. The system in Philadelphia could be overwhelmed because of how many people are out on the streets celebrating a win. And I just gave you the statistics that match up to a 5-day total that's happening in Los Angeles. And Philadelphia did not need the National Guard to handle that parade or the people coming out to celebrate the Eagles' win. Whereas Los Angeles has a bigger police jurisdiction. They have 3,000 more police officers. And again, we both agree it's within this president's right, within the executive branch's right to federalize the National Guard. 100%, it's within his right. What I'm saying is that there is a chain of command here, and state and local said that this would lead to more agitation. More police on the street means more agitation. And to Steph, to your point, it's really, are people being paid to agitate? Well, if you find out that there's more law enforcement that's going to be available where you can make more of a mark, I'm not advocating for this, by the way, but if you find out you can make more of a mark, I think that would lead to more agitation, whereas opposed to local officials are saying, we've got this covered. We have 8,800, police officers within our disposal. Los Angeles has a lot of weaponry, let's be honest, from a police. You're seeing it here in the imagery. They have a lot of weaponry at their disposal to handle these protests. In 1992, when the Rodney King riots happened, again, they planned for more people, and that was somebody that was violently beaten, luckily lived from that, on camera, and there was riots and people in the street. And so the California governor was like, we need the National Guard for this. So my whole, one-to-one argument was really about we're seeing an overwhelming of the system for a parade, for a planned victory in a smaller city, and they were able to handle the mass amount of people and almost the same number of arrests and attacks. And I get what you're saying about there is a finite end to it, but I think that there needs to be a chain of command that's followed here. And I think that's what Gavin Newsom is not relaying from a public messaging perspective. I think he's obviously attacking the president a little bit more. I think there needs to be more of that relayed, that there's a chain of command. We didn't need the National Guard. We still don't need them because we have this situation under control.
Gerard, final remarks.
The issue is also that the governor of California and local officials have for years said that they don't want the enforcement of federal law. For years, they have shown that they are not eager through progressive policies to enforce all laws equally. We saw that at other protests and riots that have broken out. So the semblance, the view from Washington, D.C. is that this police, yes, there should be a chain of command. Absolutely. It should be the governor that decides if the National Guard is needed. But the rhetoric that's been coming out of L.A. and California has been thumbing the noses at federal law enforcement, essentially, and not doing everything that they could be doing to step up. I think that's really the issue. It's a political dynamic between Newsom and progressives in California and Donald Trump, and that is affecting the view of whether California is doing enough or not. And ultimately, that is a political question. I think the legal one will be decided in the president's favor.
This episode of Can We Please Talk is presented by our friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Delicious tasting coffee since 2009. They've been our proud sponsor. You see the promo code there. Look at this. They sent me this beautiful kit right here. Listen to that. Listen to that seal coming out, right? What's in it? Environmentally safe, compostable K-Pods. I love the dark Mexican blend. You can go to their website right now, take the quiz. That quiz is going to put you with a flavor profile. Listen to that sound of the coffee that you're going to be matched up with. Go to freshroastedcoffee.com. Click the link right now in our show notes. You can see it right there. Click that link. It's going to take you to the site. When you get to checkout, use our promo code, Can We Please Get 20, all one word, Can We Please Get 20, 20. You're going to get 20% off your first purchase.